One of the skills we will be working on this semester is how to succinctly communicate economic data and information to people who are not economists and don't have an economic background. Visualization is one way to transform a large amount of data into a form that is useful to make observations, draw conclusions, and/or to make decisions. This is a high-demand skill that businesses value and are looking for when hiring new employees. The Visualizing Data Analytics project requires a chart that illustrates the relationship between the growth rates and unemployment rates for a country. This video explains the steps you need to take to create the chart. During this video, we will clean the data, transform the data where necessary, and create a visual of the data. In a follow-up video, we will modify the visual so that it is easier to understand the data. As you watch this video, I encourage you to complete each step as I complete this example. If you haven't already, pause the video and download the Creating a Visual Excel file. If you have questions that are not answered by this video, I encourage you to figure out the answers on your own before reaching out to me. You will retain more of what you learn if you find the answers on your own. Sources you may find useful include Excel help, posting your question on the Course Cafe discussion board under Communication, or a Google search. If you cannot find the answers to your questions from these sources, please reach out to me by email or text. Be specific about the questions you have so I can help you find the answers. So let's get started here. And we begin with step 1, clean the data. This means that we look over the data to make sure that there is no data entry errors and that there are no missing observations. This data is collected from the St. Louis Fed's Federal Reserve Economic Data, or FRED, database. Since this is FRED data, I do not need to check the data for data entry errors. If I or someone else had entered the data, I would want to verify that the data was entered correctly before creating my visual. Now I need to look for missing data. As I scroll down the data, I notice that the real GDP data ends at the fourth quarter of 1985. Since I want to show a relationship between the growth rates and the unemployment rates, I cannot use all of the unemployment rate data and will delete the data for the quarters where real GDP values are missing. So I will select row 48, lock all the data that is missing, and then select delete. Step 2 is transforming the data if necessary. To compare production over time, economists calculate the growth rate for each quarter. In general, a positive growth rate means production is growing and on net jobs are created. A negative growth rate means production is declining and on net jobs are being lost. We need to transform the real GDP dollar value into real GDP growth rates. To transform the real GDP data, we will use the natural log or the LN function for 2 reasons. First, the natural log is used because it calculates the growth rate in standard units of time. Second, the natural log or LN function eliminates the bias arising from the direction of change. For example, 50 to 100 is a 100% increase, but 100 to 50 is a 50% decrease. The natural log eliminates this bias. Regardless of the order of the values, the natural log change in absolute terms is the same. For 150 values, the absolute value of the rate of change is 69.31%. Our formula that we will use to calculate the real GDP growth rate is equals the natural log of the current quarter minus the natural log of the previous quarter. That gives us the value of the growth rate as a decimal, so we will multiply it by 100 to put it in percentage terms. Remember, we are beginning the data at 1978, quarter 1. So the current quarter, natural log, is 1978, quarter 1, minus the previous quarter's value, which is 1977, quarter 4, close parentheses, close parentheses. That gives me the growth rate in decimals. Now multiply it by 100, and I have the quarterly growth rate for the first quarter of 1978. I'm going to then copy that value, or copy that cell F15, so that I can then copy the function for the remaining calculations. I'm going to copy that function for the remaining cells through the fourth quarter of 1985. And that gives me the real GDP growth rates as a percent for each of the quarters. The unemployment rate data does not need to be transformed. It's already as a percent change. So all I need to do is copy the unemployment rate data, making sure that I begin with the first quarter of 1978. So 1978 through the fourth quarter of 1985, copy and paste it. This completes the modification of the data. The third step is to create a visualization. To create the visualization, in this case, we want to create a chart. I need to block the data that I want to use in the chart. I want to use the data, the date, the U.S. real GDP growth rate, and the unemployment rate, and all the observations for those quarters. Once I block the data, I select Insert. Then on the Charts area, I select the line chart and the two-dimensional lines. Now we have a chart of the data. But as it is displayed, it does not clearly provide information. While the growth rates and the unemployment rates are in different colors, orange for the U.S. unemployment rate and blue for the U.S. real GDP growth rate, the different ranges of the values obfuscate or hide the relationship between the growth rates and the unemployment rates. Therefore, we need to make improvements to this chart to make it more informative. In the next video, we will cover how to modify this chart so it is more informative.